Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first I would like to talk a little bit about Sumy direction. During the previous months we got a lot of very interesting details and updates in May and June as well. First report we got from Sumy area was related to the village by the name of Ryzhevka. I'll remind you that according to information we received from the Russian sources, they managed to cross the border and to capture this village completely. Later, the Ukrainian sources reported that they organized a counter-attack and forced the Russians to fall back, but without any geolocations confirming this. So the Russians provided us geolocations that confirms control over the village. The Ukrainians haven't. Later, we got reports also from the Ukrainian sources about additional progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation in the village by the name of Sotnitsky Kazachok. This village is located not in Sumy direction, it's mainly in Zolochev direction or in the southern part of Sumy area, and without any geolocations, the Ukrainians colored this territory as a gray zone, saying that the Russians entered the territory and basically maintained the line of combat contact and captured and reduced the gray zone between Ukraine and Russian positions. And that's it. So we got a lot of updates from different sources from MI6 about the concentration of forces, but yet without any changes on the ground. And today, on the 1st of July of 2024, we got a very interesting video published right in front of Sumy. So this is Sumy itself. This is the capital of Sumy region. This is the town that the Russians bypassed in the beginning of the special military operation without entering, but they could enter, but the Russians decided to reduce the casualties among civilians to move further in Kiev direction. And the sources, so Ukrainian sources, published the video from the village by the name of Zhuravka. This is the village also located along the border between Russia and Ukraine, and in this video we can see how the Ukrainian forces of 53rd Mechanized Brigade were bombing and attacking the Russian positions inside the village with aviation bombs. This is very interesting video for many reasons. First of all, the Ukrainians, as you can see, didn't risk to send infantry and soldiers and troopers to clear the territory. They decided to bomb this village with aviation bombs, and as you can see, we got something like secondary detonation, which confirms that there was ammo depot or small warehouse with munition inside of this area. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map and colored this part of the village as a gray zone, as a contested area, but most likely the Russians had ammo depot there, so that means that the Russian real positions much further in the southern direction, closer and closer to the capital of Sumy region, to Sumy city itself. So very interesting. So summarizing everything since the beginning of talks and rumors about the beginning of Sumy operation, we have a Russian activity in the northern flank, we have Russian activity in the southern flank, and now we start receiving updates right in front of Sumy itself. So let's follow the situation. But maybe the Russians do have some plans to start some local operation with the purpose to maintain the buffer zone and to capture some villages and settlements in this direction, to force the Ukrainians to stretch forces and just to defeat the Ukrainians once again on some other direction. Now let's move to Belgorod area. We have very interesting reports, and the most important that the Ukrainians during the previous night conducted, let's say, drone strikes all over the entire Belgorod region. The main target of Ukrainians was the energy facilities, and as a result of the strikes, the Russians lost electricity. There is complete blackout, not just in Belgorod, but in total Belgorod region. So, and according to local authorities, the situation can continue for a very long time. As for Kharkiv, the Russians attacked Kharkiv with aviation bombs, as I understand, according to information we have, with some FAB, maybe FAB 500, maybe Iskander strike. And this is the consequences of Russian strike. This is the post office, the government or post office that Ukrainians, soldiers, military soldiers and forces were using in military purposes. Of course, civilians were using this office as well, but this post office was also used by the Ukrainian military authorities for redeployments of different products, goods, parts for military, for drones and many other purposes. So as you can see, the Russians destroyed the warehouse, and the most important, the Russians destroyed vehicles, significant number of vehicles that Ukrainians were using in different purposes. So this is the consequences of attack, and according to information we have, the Ukrainian drone strike in Belgorod was something like an act of revenge on this situation in Kharkiv itself. Now let's move to Liptsy direction. We have lots of very interesting updates. After a short operational pause that had been taking place in this area for probably 3 or 4 days, the Russians published the video of another FAB 3000 use. According to information we have, this was the temporary position point of the 30th Brigade Kharkiv of Armed Forces of Ukraine, and as a result of his FAB 3000 strike, the entire building was reduced to ruins. Currently, we don't know for sure about the exact number of losses that Ukrainians suffered as a result of this attack, but the Russians are saying that there are a few tens of soldiers were lost their lives as a result of that attack. As for Globokha, the Ukrainians continue attempts to counterattack and to restore control over the village. The Russian sources published the video of another attempt to attack by BTR-4 of Armored Forces of Ukraine. The Ukrainian armored vehicle was moving on the, let's say, western outskirts of the village, but either the BTR got on the minefield or was destroyed as the anti-tank missile. It's unknown, but the BTR was destroyed somewhere here. Later, the Ukrainian sources published the video of how they were hunting the Russians inside of Globokha. As you can see in this video, most of the village was already reduced to ruins. The Ukrainians are sending swarms of drones in this area, hundreds. This video very interesting. Probably hundreds of drones were flying above this village, attacking and hunting the Russians that were trying to hide themselves between the ruins and basements of this area. So, according to the status, according to the current status and current, let's say, visual status of the village, most likely during the next few days, the Ukrainians will launch another attempt to capture with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back completely. A few weeks ago, the Group of Forces North reported that very likely there is a very high chances that the Russians will leave another, reading quotes, Rabotina somewhere from Kharkiv direction. So most likely the Russians were talking about this village by the name of Globokha. Now let's move further in Vovchansk direction. As you can see, we don't have anything from this area. The only video we got from this building, from Vovchansk Lycey number 2, and in this video that we can see right now in front of the screens, we can see the clashes inside of this college, and the Ukrainians are saying that this is like the battle of defense operation of the Ukrainians who are trying to hold the stronghold from Russian storms and from Russian offensives. If you remember, just a day ago or 2 days ago, we got another video from the same area, and we got the video how the Russians were supporting this territory with water. We see this video in the morning. The Ukrainian drone, not the Russians, but the Ukrainians were supporting their soldiers inside of this stronghold with the drones. They sent FPV drone with water, and the Ukrainians that were sieged, let's say, take some water from the ground. So I'm not sure, and the Ukrainians author are saying that they don't know for sure when exactly this video was made. Maybe this is the fresh video, maybe this is something old, they don't know. But so they also, the Ukrainian sources also don't change the color of the map. They're just showing some episodes of the battle for Vovchansk. But once again, it doesn't mean that the video is old. The video could be made, let's say, yesterday or the day before yesterday. So we will wait a bit, but if we continue receiving updates, of course we will adjust the map. We will color this territory as a territory under Ukrainian control. Maybe the Ukrainians in this school, in this college are encircled, and the rest positions around these areas under complete Russian control. For now, we don't know for sure. As for the Citadel, we haven't received any updates about further Russian progress. Just we got one report from Russian sources. They stated that as a result of clashes during the previous night, the Russians lost control over one building. So I'll remind you that according to information we have, by the evening, yesterday evening, the Russians captured 3 buildings in the Citadel, and today one source was reported that one of the buildings was lost by the Russians. For now, without geolocations, without changes on the map, just to keep this information in our minds. Now let's move further in Kupiansk direction, and the most important updates are coming from Stelmakhovka. We got updates that the Russians began offensive, or this is like old videos, currently we don't know for sure, but in this video we can see how the process of how the Russians were storming the Ukrainian positions with significant number of infantry, stormtroopers, tanks, and many other different types of weapon. And based on this video, we have adjusted the map and colored this territory as a complete territory under Russian control. So the most furthest point of Russian geolocation was spotted here, discovered here. So most likely the Russians did answer Stelmakhovka, at least the part of Stelmakhovka that located on the Russian side of Zherebets River. For now, we are not changing the Stelmakhovka itself into the gray zone or something like this, but most likely, summarizing everything, summarizing reports we had during the previous days, most likely the Russians already established complete control over, let's say, 60 or 50% of the village. So let's wait just a little bit for another day, and obviously we're going to receive additional updates or additional information. Now we're moving further. The Russians continue offensive operation in the direction of Siversk. As for now, we don't have any reports regarding Sporne, Razdolovka, so the Russians are digging in deeper, try to prepare their positions and to prepare before further offensive. As for Chasov Yar, we haven't received anything special, interesting, but we got very interesting details about the Russian offensive operation in Pivnichne, Druzhba. Druzhba and Pivnichne is the Ukrainian titles of the settlements. The Russians, the titles of the settlements is Kirova. So this is the Kirova area, and the Russians, we were very, let's say, surprised when the Russians managed to capture significant territories and enter basically this citadel, this stronghold, this agglomeration. It was a very big surprise. And today the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation provided us additional details how they managed to do this. The Russians are saying that a large stronghold of Ukrainian armed forces on the eastern outskirts of the village of Kirov was captured by assault units of veterans detachment of the center group of troops using underground tunnel. The detachment's military personnel secretly cleared and used a tunnel more than 3 kilometers long along the Seversky Donetsk Canal and went behind the rear of well-fortified strong point with long-term firing points and underground shelters. So the Russians didn't give us any coordinates or location where exactly did it happen. The only thing they told us that the Russians moved along the pipelines that were located along Seversky Donetsk-Donbass Canal. In the only area that fits to this description is this one. So we have few days ago we got the video published by the Ukrainian sources. This is the video of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning the Russians in this area. This territory, this stronghold used to be under complete Ukraine control, but now we see, and this was the first building, that was captured by the Russians as a result of offensive. So most likely the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation was talking exactly about these territories. So as I understand, according to description that was provided by the Minister of Defense, the Russians were moving along these pipelines. These are pipelines. This is the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass pipelines, the part that the canal goes on the surface in the pipelines, and the Russians were moving around 3 kilometers. They bypassed through the pipelines and then they landed in this area and captured this big stronghold. So that was another pipeline operation conducted by the Russians since the beginning of this year. The first one took place in Avdiivka. This is the second one, and this operation led to complete collapse of Ukrainian defense and significant gains of armed forces of Russian Federation in this direction. So let's wait for more details. Probably the Russians or some sources will provide us some videos of this operation or something like this. As for western Avdiivka direction, we haven't received anything during the previous night, just another confirmation from some pro-Russian sources that the Russians managed to establish complete control over the village by the name of Yasnobrodovka. Most likely the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will provide us this information today, and then we will adjust the map accordingly. As for Konstantinovka, Krasnogorivka, we haven't received anything, and we start receiving additional updates from the village of Konstantinovka. First, the Russian sources reported that the Russians began offensive towards Konstantinovka with significant number of armed vehicles, infantry, that the Russians during the previous few days were able to enter Konstantinovka itself in the southeastern outskirts. Then the Ukrainians counterattack, the Russians, let's say, retreat, and that was like almost everyday process. The Russians entering, then retreating, then entering again, then retreating again. And by the morning of the 1st of July, the Ukrainian sources published the videos, significant number of episodes of those attacks. So now we have complete proofs and complete geolocations confirming that the Russians were attacking the Ukrainians in the vicinity of Paraskovyevka and the vicinity of Konstantinovka. As for Paraskovyevka, the Ukrainians probably discovered about the Russian plans and they counterattack, according to the Ukrainian sources, and managed to establish control over some buildings in the western outskirts of the village, and they were using these positions as like first defense belt before possible offensive towards this Shakhtar residential area. So the clashes in Konstantinovka are renewed, and most likely in the next weeks or days, if the Russians are able to advance and get some success, we will start receiving first updates from inside of the village. So the battle for the main defense belt in this area has started. As for Urozhaina Staromayorsk, no changes during the previous 24 hours, as well as nothing from Zaporozhye. But no, there is one important update. Some Russian sources, some Russian mappers reported that the Russians artillery is actually targeting the positions of the armed forces in Ukraine in Kharkiv direction, east of Mala-Takhmachka. So according to some Russian sources, the Russians began artillery preparation, began bombing the Ukrainian positions and the strongholds in the southeastern part of the town by the name of Mala-Takhmachka. And according to some speculations and projections, the Russians may try to attack this area with the purpose to answer Mala-Takhmachka and to cut the Ukrainians completely and to encircle Ukrainians completely inside of these fields, inside of this artillery pocket between Kopany, Rabotina and Mala-Takhmachka itself. So we don't know for sure whether the Russians are going to do this or not, but this is a very interesting statement, as you can see. Now let's move further. Let's talk a bit about the situation in Ukraine. According to information we have some map showing the energy facilities, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians have lost almost everything. They still managed to save the work of nuclear power plants, but without small power plants, nuclear power plants are useless. So the Ukrainians still have few power plants along Dnipro River and few of them in the western part of Ukraine. So this is something like the final plan B for the Russians. If everything goes completely wrong, if something goes wrong, the Russians probably will destroy first the rest of small power plants that will lead to complete collapse of energy infrastructure in Ukraine as well. Zelensky start talking a lot about peace, about peaceful negotiations, and today he start using a completely new word when talking about peace agreement with Russia. He's not talking anymore about the borders of 1991. He's not talking about some monies or different things. He's talking about three things: NATO, to join NATO, European Union, to join European Union, and of course about some kind of satisfaction. Currently he hasn't give us any updates what does it mean satisfaction, but probably some money compensation for the territory that Ukraine may lose as a result of possible peace agreement with Russia. We got more and more details. Additional escalation from Belarus. Today the Belarus will be ready to use tactical nuclear weapons if a threat to its sovereignty arises, say the Chief of General Staff of the Armed Forces, Pavel Muravyka. I'll remind you that just a few days ago he reported that the Belarusian reconnaissance intelligence services managed to discover significant concentration of forces along the border with Ukraine. And today, the Belarusian authorities reported that General Staff, the same person, reported that at the border of the Republic with the European Union countries, there are around 10 NATO battalions, tactical groups with a total number of about 20,000 soldiers. So if we summarize everything around Belarus, there is already probably 50 or 60,000, 20,000 from European Unions and countries, and around 40,000 on the border with Ukraine. So very big, powerful group that can probably even resolve some tactical, even operational tasks like additional creation of buffer zone and many other things. But of course, it's not very good thing to joke with the president of Belarus. Now let's move to Europe. We have additional reports that US military bases in Europe are on high alert due to the threat of terrorist attack, likely the highest in at least 10 years. So something wrong is happening in Europe, so let's follow. Maybe we're gonna receive additional updates. And probably the most important thing that's today, during the previous night, the parliament elections in France ended, and Macron party was completely defeated, and the first positions was after Le Pen's National Rally Party is in the lead with 32.2% of the votes. So this is a very big change in policy of Europe, in policy of France, that can also affect the relations with Russia and of course with Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.